So, what's up, Ashley? Good morning. It is Sunday, and we're both in Chicago in our homes. It's getting a little bit warmer now outside. How are
Thank
you doing?
God. I'm good.
Yeah.
Actually did a little bit of cleaning this weekend. I've taken the dog out. Very Midwestern mom vibes over here. I'm looking over at my kiddo with his headphones
Yeah.
on his laptop.
So you and I, we connected in late 2020, and I remember it was through Instagram. We published the Chicago Graphic Design Club. We published a post about the Bauhaus documentary that you helped co-produce. And since then, we've kept in touch, and we've done several things together. And you've played a pretty big role in the evolution of the club. So I just want to start by just acknowledging and thanking you for your supports.
I think about you guys a lot and I talk about you guys a lot because you really had this idea that was like such a little kernel and has spread into such a really sticky
Mm-hmm.
network for Chicago. And it filled a gap that I think is pretty clear now in the design community. Um, so anyway, it's been very exciting to see you guys grow.
Yeah. And so much of, I think both of our paths obviously overlap a lot because we both really value the exchange of ideas and then also the human connection that I think we all crave for that we lack sometimes in digital spaces. So
Mhm.
what I like about the work that you do is that it's all emphasizing that human connection, and you put together these wonderful immersions that I really want to talk about with you today because you have one that's coming up in just a few
True.
months.
That
Yeah.
is true. That is true. We will be bringing about 30, they won't all be designers, but I'll say like a lot of designers, design leaders really, and other creative leaders with us to the Sacred Valley of Peru in June of 2025.
Yeah. So to you, why is it so important to experience the world in 3D as opposed to behind our screens? That's what I love that. I love that people like yourself exist that are great curators of experiences and that are also these synthesizers of ideas and also these just bringing people together for really interesting dialogue. So can you maybe share with us why immersions matter, especially today, like in a really polarized, scary world that we're living in?
So the real reason why I started Murmur Ring was really so that we could curate these immersions. Like that's the piece of the business, even though we do a variety of things. That's the kind of, I think core idea of our business that I'm most passionate about. And I think this idea of bringing people together in real space and time is powerful and valuable, particularly now, during this really scary moment, polarized moment, as you said, because we're in these echo chambers of kind of information that's algorithmically sort of like, pre defined for us to have access to. And it's limiting the sort of like, spontaneity and discovery of just life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's also like the digital ways in which we're like living a lot of our lives and doing most of our work, I think in particular, um, it's not honoring our body and the sort of multi-visceral ways that we can receive and information and make meaning of it. I think there's a lot to be said about being in the same space with other people and feeling energy and like body language and like sharing in something that's visceral. And while it's great that we can do this over Zoom and it offers, a fair bit of flexibility when it comes to being able to connect globally with people and all of that, it is not as dynamic. It's flat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big piece of it. I think more than that, we're in this moment where things feel really, really, really complex. The challenges that we have are more enmeshed with one another than they have been before. We can't piece apart, let's look at climate change over here and separate that from, this like post-truth or fake news kind of issue that we have over here to the like increasingly dictatorial government that we have over here to um, our emerging public health crises, right? Like all these things all fit with each other. And so that's a pretty, I think, you know, overwhelming set of challenges. And how do you even start to think about it? How do you even start to look at it? How do you, our kind of, I think, impulse is to want to simplify, isolate, detract. And so the immersion model asks us to instead kind of lean in, but in a space that's been specifically created for us to be together in kind of like a safe space and really reflect on major challenges and issues that deserve a lot of attention directly at a time when, our attention's being pulled in so many different directions. It says like stop, pause, and reflect together through a shared experience. So I think it's an important, kind of intervention almost to the digital era that we're in. And when we started doing the immersions, it was in 2015. So a lot has changed as far as the way that we're living and working since then.
Yeah. So what can people expect from signing up and attending their first immersion with Murmur Ring?
Yeah, well, so you participated in the immersion that we did in Oaxaca last year in 2024, which was just almost directly a year ago.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So and I'd be curious to also hear your point of view on this, but all of our immersions really focus on everything being as tangible and as experiential as possible. So we curate each day. This will be about 4 days long in the Sacred Valley immersion that's coming up in June. We curate each site visit, everything we're eating, how we're traveling, where we're staying, what the different facilitation moments look like and feel like around the core themes that we're looking at. But in a sense of like just feeling very intimate, and it will unfold in a way that feels very organic. It is very organic. We've sort of set everything up very, very deliberately to take people on a journey of thinking, and there are insights that we believe folks will likely arrive at in that process. But at the same time, there's always going to be surprises and just, again, like the spontaneity of real experience unfolding. So the outcomes are still, have an element of surprise. We can make some guesses as to what will come of this, but some of it is really going to be dependent on the really true engagements that people have. So I think that is a real counterpoint to this very kind of like automated, convenience-centric mode that we're in most of the time. So that's one piece of it. People can expect to eat really amazing food. We have an entire day planned with Meal, which is one of the best restaurants in the world. And it's nestled above a natural food laboratory. So it's an ancient ruin where they would test out how different food could be cooked at different temperatures based on the elevation. But we're doing an entire kind of like foraging walk, learning about the native ingredients, and then we'll have a multi-course meal there, which is going to be really, really special. When I went to Scout in July with Mickey, my son, we did like at the tasting menu, and they gave him a kid's version, and it was the funniest thing because he had like all these, whatever dishes that were set in front of him. And I mean, his eyes were as big as saucers, and they were explaining all these, like, rare herbs and different things. And anyway, so it was a lot of fun. But I'm really excited about that. We are looking at gastronomy quite a bit on this one. All of our immersions do focus, though, on food as like an essential, I think, piece of, again, like humanity, but also eating together and sharing in a meal is a really wonderful way to connect. They will be meeting folks that they would never have had access to otherwise. Like the people that we connect with and introduce our immersion cohorts to are not necessarily people that can be Googled readily, or, people that take guests. It'll be a mix of really interesting, innovative, creative producers who could share their craft, share their vision, share their philosophies with us, and in many cases give us an opportunity to try some of those mediums out ourselves. I know, like in Oaxaca, you had an opportunity to do some textile dyeing, there was printmaking, there was food, there was cooking with a chef. So like this very kind of hands-on experience that, again, I think is a real antidote to this digital way that we're working, where we're pushing pixels around or whatever it is. So yeah. And then I think a lot of like really deep conversations, that some of which happen as a group that are facilitated. But then I think, one of the other real joys of participating in this for folks, or at least what people have told me, is like these conversations that they have one-on-one when they're traveling together, walking from place to place, or staying in the same, villa or whatever it is. They have this, kind of chance to get to know the other participants in a really unique way, that I think just breeds a pretty deep camaraderie. So
yeah, I think that was probably my favorite part of the immersion that I attended. It was all those in between moments that happen when you're waiting for, the bus to pick you up, or where you're waking up and you're drinking, like you're meeting in a cafe and you're talking about your day, or you're talking about what you're looking forward to. To me, those moments feel, although they're very ordinary moments, they feel very extraordinary in this different context, away from the usual, like, everyday, busyness of wherever it is that we live. So that was probably my biggest takeaway, is like all those little in between moments that happen and that I don't really think you can plan for. The amount of conversations that happen, like, for example, on the bus on the way to a site, or walking back to the hotel that we're staying at after, evening together. It was just incredible. So I really enjoyed last year's immersion for that reason.
I'm really glad to hear that. I get really excited about the friendships that blossom from this. And I find out, from folks that have participated that, oh, now they're doing business together. Or somebody's hired someone to build their website, or do, you know what I mean? Like these kind of natural collaborations happen, but also people get together for drinks and coffees and lunch, and they use one another as thought partners going forward, which I think is for me, that's one of the metrics of success, right? Is like people gel in that way and feel like they now have made a handful of really important new friends.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for this one too, because everybody's actually going to be staying in the same place. So we've actually reserved almost like an entire kind of compound of sorts. So everybody's going to have their own dwelling, but all on the same property. And there will be no one else there besides our group. So that's just going to give like everybody that additional opportunity to hang out with folks just by virtue of staying in the same location. When we were in Oaxaca, we had rented out a handful of small places. So, you had groups of 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 together, but this one, everybody's going to be together. And there's a few people who are really big karaoke fans. So I think we'll have a karaoke machine as well, just to kind of like bring a little bit more fun to the evenings there. So.
Yeah. So who would you say is the target audience for immersions?
Well, I think, I think it's leaders. I think it's curious, I'm going to use the word soulful.
Okay.
um, Leaders who are interested in taking a deeper look at the world around them, um, and are enthusiastic about having that kind of exchange, in the real world with peers.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's folks who are being asked to solve complex challenges and they want different kinds of inputs. I think it's people who, understand the value of in-person experience, or maybe they're just really hungry for it because they've been, doing this kind of computer work for a long time and
Yeah.
want that chance to reconnect. Folks who embrace travel. Not all of our immersions require people to like get on an airplane and go far away. I mean, we customize immersions for clients sometimes in the city that they live in. So, but I think there's still always this element of moving and being in really different environments, even if it's in your backyard. We've brought people places in Chicago that they would never have discovered or spent time in otherwise. So yeah, I think those are some of the attributes.
Yeah. So the immersion is happening in June from the 23rd to the 27th in Peru. And I understand that one of the people that you've been partnering with that's been assisting in this immersion is someone that attended last year's immersion. And it just kind of speaks to that to that nature of possibility that happens in these kind of things, that you kind of never know where they're going to take you and how you're going to end up collaborating with someone. So if you can talk about why Peru this year.
Sure.
And the meaning behind it.
Let's talk about Rodrigo first, which is who you're referring to,
Yes.
who was among your cohort in Oaxaca last year.
Yes.
And Rodrigo is he's an Institute of Design alum. So the Institute of Design at IIT here in Chicago is also a partner on this, and we can talk about that too in a little bit. Rodrigo was really, I think, inspired by the multi-generational knowledge that gets passed through traditional forms of production that we saw in Oaxaca. And of course, there's a lot of that as well in Peru. And so while he was there, I think it occurred to him, wow, there would be a really great opportunity to also bring people to Peru to look at this in the Peruvian context, which kind of like Oaxaca, the Sacred Valley is seeing a lot more development in recent years, and there's much more to come. So it's kind of at this critical moment where you have, these kind of local indigenous ecosystems where there's a lot of possibility of disruption. And there's also a lot to learn and be inspired by. And so we're trying to harness the inspiration and the learnings, and also think about how this moment where it's a region undergoing change, like how could this moment be better designed for the best possible outcomes. So those are some of the things that I think Rodrigo and I have talked about. But he's Peruvian. He loves his country, and I think he sees a lot of possibility, like for also designers to really like be inspired and learn from things that are going on there. And I think he sees how much growth, in the creative industries and in design is going to be happening there too in the coming years. And so I think he's really interested in that. There's been huge changes in, gastronomy, and Peru's really like on the global map as a really primary culinary destination. So if you want to look at, gastronomy analogously to design or the creative industries, it's like we could kind of see some similar maybe trajectories for like design. But Rodrigo, he had a design consultancy at one point that was, I would describe like, as kind of like the IDEO of Latin America. They had multiple locations in Brazil, in Mexico, in Peru, in Colombia. They had they were also present in Chicago because it was all Institute of Design like alumni who had formed this firm, and they sold to Accenture a couple years ago, and Rodrigo has recently started this firm, Empathy. And so it's a new design and innovation consultancy, primarily focused on LATAM. And actually, he expressed recently, which I didn't know, that he was kind of doing some soul searching during the immersion in Oaxaca about whether he still wanted to be a designer, or like, like where he was going to really go professionally. Did design still offer, the sort of like promise that it once had? And I guess the Oaxaca immersion kind of reconnected him to his design roots and his belief in design. And that really warmed my heart to hear. And I think a lot of people were soul searching.
Yeah, definitely.
They were at moments of relationships or, professional choices. And they were using this time to like also just personally kind of step out of their day-to-day routine and have, I don't know, just like an opportunity to get a little like more in touch with themselves and their real passion and their path forward.
It was really nice to last year to have those facilitated moments of reflection outdoors. And we did guided meditation, and I remember thinking to myself of how valuable those spaces where you have permission to kind of just exist and leave your role at the door. Like, you don't need to really be anyone in these spaces. Like, you can just be who you are. And I think we live in this place where we put so much emphasis on titles and accolades and who we are and what we think we are and all this kind of stuff. So for me, the immersion was like this opportunity to just kind of just be Christian, to just see Ashley for Ashley, to see Stephen for Stephen, and so forth, without the worries or the pressures of someone or something looking over you, kind of telling you how to do things. Because there is no right or wrong way, in my opinion, to go about being in an immersion. It kind of like invites people to feel like a beginner again, And I think it's really interesting because given that the audience is like people in leadership, to have them come to a space where they kind of have to put their leadership aside and just put themselves in the shoes of a beginner, to me is so humbling. And again, like, there's just so much value in that, I think.
I love that. I think there's something about having the sort of like freedom or the situation necessitating that you have to be your authentic self.
Yeah.
And, everybody talks about vulnerability nowadays, but I think there's a level of like vulnerability with that. But I think when people kind of get past that, it like presents the opportunity to actually see much deeper connections and friendships amongst people that are sometimes hard to hard to achieve. Like you said, in these kind of like more like we're all sort of units of production trying to get things done in organizations that can be siloed, that can be hierarchical. And just breaking down those barriers and letting people really just be themselves. When I think about like other times that you get to do that in your life, it's like what? Like when you go to college and you know what I mean? You've got the folks you're meeting in the dorms, or, we have fewer opportunities to do that, I think. you know, as um, as life goes on. And I think this is sort of one of those rare times
Yeah,
to like kind of, yeah, like be able to see yourself anew too.
yeah, I agree. So, anything else that we want to talk about? I know Institute of Design is involved. They're a partner for this year's immersion. I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about that partnership and how they are going to be involved.
Yeah, I'll talk about Institute of Design. It's a very important partner. And I can also provide just like a little bit more of a rundown of like some of the other things that we're doing. We talked
Yeah.
about meal, but yeah. So let's see. So the Institute of Design is actually where this immersion model was originally um, like seeded. So back in 2015, I convinced the dean of the Institute of Design where I was working to take a chance on prototyping this like immersion version of what had previously been a design conference. So instead of doing our design conference in the same way as we typically had, could we bring people like around the world and have these experiences? So there's sort of like an origin story relevance to the Institute of Design being a part of this. We continue to collaborate with them all the time and do various immersions there. They really believe in the sort of like immersive learning model. Um, and that comes out in a lot of different ways through the curriculum and through their engagements. But the dean, Anijo Matthew, um, he's very much focused on design leadership. Like, what are the true, I guess, like, moments, the tools, the experiences that future design leaders need in order to navigate this like super, super complex, really global future that's in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard him say that, you know, we cannot try to solve the world's problems from behind a screen. We have to put ourselves in those places to really grasp the contexts and the opportunities and overcome the challenges that exist. So he believes very strongly in that. And I'm just thrilled and honored that they want to partner on this immersion that Murmur Ring is curating with empathy. And there will be a fair few, ID alumni in attendance,
Yeah.
which is exciting too.
Yeah. So, as we wrap up, what are you looking most forward to? What does Ashley want to get out of this immersion selfishly for you? I know you did a site visit last year, but is there anything in particular that you really, really want to get your hands on or anything that you really want to do?
Well, I'll give you like a little rundown of some of the things that are like top of mind. So one is this day that we're going to spend with meal, which I'm super, super stoked about.
Yep.
Um, we're also going to an Andean distillery where the folks on the cohort will have an opportunity to make their own spirit, but also learn about this this sort of traditional process. Um, and it's kind of got some parallels to mezcal, and some of the challenges that have happened in like, in Mexico too around mezcal. So I'm interested in digging in a little bit more there as far as preservation. Um, that that partner has actually a reforestation partner as well. So they're actually like, planting trees and revitalizing the environment. Um, there are some traditional ceramicists um, and textile artists that I'm really looking forward to meeting. I think it's really exciting to like, I don't know, always like my favorite thing always is to get into people's like workspaces and studio spaces and see how they're doing things.
Yeah.
Like it's just like it never gets old, right? And I always make it a point to do that, in day-to-day life too. So I'm really looking forward to that. But I think also just the deeper conversation around what has changed in the past decades and how are some of these, more traditional producers now starting to create, I would say, like real systems, like circular economy systems,
Mm-hmm.
creating a lot of jobs and pioneering sort of like self-sustained models. I think there's so much to learn from that. I really love that we have an opportunity. to reverse the lens of how we think about innovation.
Mm.
It's not like there's a sort of bias that innovation is happening in like Europe or America and that we're exporting those ideas to lesser developed parts of the world. And I actually think, we really need to question that sort of way of thinking, and in fact look to places like Peru, India, other places in South America, Africa, to see the innovations that are happening there and learn from them in the like American context or in the global context. In places like Peru, you see a lot of improvisation, you see scarce resources, but people really and organizations really being creative about how they can solve problems even under those conditions.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is something to be said for imperfect, ever-evolving systems at play, especially when they're so communally grounded, that we really need to like start to learn from as we think about how we allocate resources here. We have a tendency as Americans to want to say, oh, we're going to create a perfect system and then we'll deploy it. And really with like the rapid advancement of technology, we really don't have the time to do that. By the time we've made the perfect system, it's obsolete.
Yeah.
So we do need to get more kind of comfortable with like being more flexible, more adaptive, and always being kind of like a work in progress, and be more responsive to the realities around us instead of this kind of top down, intellectual direction setting that is kind of the tendency.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I look forward to hearing more about the immersion. And like I said, for anyone listening, like it's a great opportunity to kind of get out of your bubble and experience something that is new. It's different alongside other people that are having the same questions as you are, other people that are struggling in the same way as you are. Like I think there's, to me, the common thread last year was that we're all kind of, to your point, soul searching. Like we all have some itch that we're trying to navigate around and find a solution for. So that solidarity, I think, is really, really important. And I think you're such a great leader and a great person to put these things together. So again, just want to thank you for having the idea and establishing it and having it be something that's been successful for years now. So
thank you so much. I really hope that there are some folks from the Chicago Graphic Design Club that join us.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll be in the company of a lot of really incredible, accomplished Chicago-based designers, but also there's going to be this very global group. So we'll probably have, between 30 and 50% will probably be like, LATAM. Mm-hmm. But there will be definitely for sure like a lot of Chicago folks to get closer to. So
cool. Awesome. Well,
thank you so much. We'll talk soon.